this notion that there's no money to do this or the books are too tight, of course there's money to do this. If they want to find money, they could equalise capital gains tax, they could tax share buybacks. If they want to find the money to lift kids out of poverty, they can do it. They are choosing not to. That's not good enough. We'll do the right thing, we'll stand up to them on this, and I reckon a lot of the Labour MPs who are sitting in the Commons will probably agree with us. So what we're going to do, and I think this is a pretty basic thing, is firstly look at what the Labour Party bring forward. To all intents and purposes, it looks like they're not going to take any action on the two-child benefit cap, a Tory policy that the Labour Party are now wanting to continue with. Obviously impacts hundreds of thousands of kids across the UK. 27,000 of those households are in Scotland. There's about 15,000 kids who would be brought out of poverty, at least 15,000 immediately, if they were to scrap the cap. If there is no action on that, then we'll seek to put forward an amendment in the House of Commons to force a vote on that issue. Because I think it should be the bare minimum for a Labour government to want to bring kids out of poverty. It's something that we obviously believe passionately, and we fought against this policy when the Tories put it in place. We've fought against it throughout their time in government. Public were promised change. Well, change would be to get rid of that cap. We're going to make sure that we hold Labour's feet to the fire on that, and hopefully MPs from Scotland and MPs from the rest of the UK will join us in our action if it comes to it.
When you hear Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister this morning, acknowledging that people will be disappointed, but, acquiescing that they simply can't afford it, what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I'm disappointed when I don't get fajitas for my tea. I think disappointed for keeping kids in poverty doesn't quite cut it. This is one of the most serious issues in society we're talking about here. The Labour Party's defining mission should be about lifting kids out of poverty, and they should be doing everything that they possibly can to do that. It doesn't sound like they're that intent on making sure that they reverse the policies, reverse the damage that's been caused by 14 years of Tory cruelty and austerity. And the whole point of being in power is you get to put forward your principles, you get to act upon them, and you get to put forward change that you believe in. I would expect Angela Rayner, I would expect the Labour Party to want to change things, but they don't seem willing to do so. And this notion that there's no money to do this or the books are too tight, of course there's money to do this. It's about £3 billion. There's be scope within the Treasury to do it as it stands at the moment. But if they want to find money, they could equalise capital gains tax, they could tax share buybacks, which is obviously a way that big companies are avoiding taxation at the moment. So if they want to find the money to lift kids out of poverty, they can do it. They are choosing not to. That's not good enough. We'll do the right thing, we'll stand up to them on this, and I reckon a lot of the Labour MPs who are sitting in the Commons will probably agree with us.
It's interesting what you have to say about capital gains tax. Would you say that they're not doing that perhaps because they're too in bed with business?
I would say that. I think they're terrified of upsetting a certain portion of the electorate in the south of England, and that's not good enough. If you're in government, you need to acknowledge that there's going to be trade-offs, and you need to make sure that you are focused on your principles and your priorities, and you're able to put into effect what it is that you believe in. Now, traditionally, the Labour Party would say that we can take money from those who can afford it and put it into the pockets of those who need it most. That, of course, is kids in poverty, and they should do this as a bare minimum. We'll continue to push them to see sense here. We'll do everything that we can to make them see sense. Parliament allows us to do that with an amendment in the coming days, and if they don't take action, we will, because if we don't have a voice on this, if we don't have unity on ending child poverty, then where is this government going to lead us down in the next few years?
What sort of benefits can you see? I mean, what have you modelled? What will you see children benefiting from if this cap is lifted? So
in Scotland, we introduced the Scottish Child Payment, which has been regarded by charities as game-changing. It's just over £26 a week, direct into the pockets of families, and it's estimated to be keeping 100,000 children out of poverty in Scotland alone. The benefit that we're talking about here is one which is applied by the UK government. And in a Scottish context, we know it impacts 27,000 households, around about 15,000 kids who would be brought out of poverty immediately if it was to be scrapped. That's a real life change to those children, which will hopefully allow them to go on and have better futures. And the sum of money we're talking about is so small when we're thinking about the huge budget that the UK government has. And to be able to raise that capital, I mean, I've given suggestions already, would be simple for the government to do. I think a lot of Labour MPs, as I've said, will be very uneasy about the stance that their government is taking here. And we need to see real change, real action from the Labour Party. Otherwise, this policy becomes their policy. It's no longer the Tory two-child cap, it's the Labour two-child cap, and that's not something that they want associated with them.
That payment in Scotland, though, it reduces down to £15, doesn't it, for children after the first child? Has there been any discussion about keeping that up?
So obviously we have to operate within the financial remit that we do have, and we've made big decisions, increasing taxation on those who earn the most in Scotland, which has caused a certain amount of discomfort for us politically and has annoyed certain people in Scotland. But we've done that because we wanted to find the money to be able to prevent 100,000 kids being in poverty. Of course we want to do more, of course we want to go further. A lot of that's going to be based upon the financial settlement that stems from the UK government, but we've taken bold and brave progressive taxation decisions in contrast to what the Tories were doing down here, and it looks like in contrast to what the Labour Party are going to continue with, to change something, to change the lives of young people and to give them opportunity. And I'm brought up in a background, a working class background, like so many other Scottish politicians, and we know how important it is to give kids opportunities, to give them hope for the future. You can't do that if they're in poverty. So it's the bare minimum. Make sure that this cap is scrapped, and the Labour Party have to do the right thing.
Have you had any conversations with Labour's Kim Johnson, who's also planning to table an amendment?
I've not spoken with Kim as of yet. I know I've seen in the press that Kim's obviously seeking to table an amendment as well. I'm sure that myself and others will try and engage with lots of Labour MPs on this, because there is a unity that exists between a lot of the Labour backbenchers and ourselves, and indeed other opposition members on this very important issue. We'll try and work collaboratively with anyone we can, even if it's members of the UK government, to get this cap scrapped, because that's the right thing to do. We're going into this in good faith, as we did throughout the course of the Tory party's tenure when this was obviously brought in the first instance. Labour Party have the power to change it. We'll do everything we can and work with anyone we can to make sure that's put into action.
Do you think that if you had worked more collaboratively with the Labour Party before the election, then perhaps you wouldn't have lost as many seats as you did?
I think it's important in politics to stand up in an election, stand up for your values and what you believe in. Now we're pretty clear about what our values are. We believe that we should be part of the European Union. We believe that we should be ending austerity and that we shouldn't continue with the public sector cuts that are coming down the road. We believe that we should have huge investment in combating climate change and making sure we get to net zero, that migration is a good thing. We need more people to come and live and work in Scotland and right across the rest of the UK. Obviously, people in Scotland chose to vote for Labour in greater numbers than the SNP on this occasion. We need to reflect on that as a party, but it doesn't change our principles, it doesn't change our values. And you know, that's important in politics. I don't think a lot of politicians necessarily have the principles, the priorities and the values that they proclaim to. We'll stick to ours, and hopefully, like in the coming days, it'll have an impact down here by making sure that we can change the lives of those who need it the most.
Would you say the election shows that you've lost your mandate for independence?
I think it's a really hard sell for anyone to suggest that things haven't changed in Scotland. Of course, the election was really disappointing and challenging for us. I mean, I lost a whole host of colleagues, and there's obviously been huge consequences as a result of that internally for us and for all their staff members as well. And it's going to take time for us to reflect and renew our relationship with people back home in Scotland. It has, of course, as I say, been a tough time. But we still have the pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament, but we need to make sure that in the run-up to 2026 we do much better than we did in the general election up till now, and that's the challenge that faces us. But that can only happen if the party is honest with itself and it renews trust with the public.
Will you still be pushing for, you pushed for Gaza extensively before the election. Is that still one of your priorities?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, we managed during the course of the last Parliament, indeed just a few months ago, through our actions in Parliament, but also through the weight of public pressure, to change the policy position of the now Labour government. There's still a lot more that needs to be done. We need to see an end to arms sales. We need that immediate ceasefire. We need to see compliance with the ICJ. The Labour Party have intimated that they would do some of these things, but we're going to hold them to account on that, because the destruction of Gaza hasn't stopped, the death and starvation of people hasn't stopped, and they need someone to stand up for them in the UK Parliament. We do have a say in this. We are a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and we'll hold Labour's feet to the fire on this, as we've done in recent months.
Do you worry that with the UK election and with the upcoming America election that eyes are off the Middle East? I'm
not entirely sure. I think I think there's obviously a real connection between what's happening in the States and other global issues. I mean, we've seen Trump's presidential candidate is obviously very much against support for Ukraine, has very strong views on the situation in the Middle East as well. And that's where I think it's vital for those of us who, and this goes back to what I said earlier, for those of us who have strong views, who have strong principles, and who want to see change, to be loud and to be clear about what it is that we believe in. Now, that can be challenging at times. People don't want you to necessarily do that all the time, but that's where we've got to be clear about what it is that we believe in and argue for it and make sure that it does stay at the forefront of the agenda. The world is very unstable at the moment. There's a lot of elections right across the Western world and beyond, and that instability breeds concern. And we need to make sure that whilst that's happening, we offer stability and hope to everyone.
Just a bit of a dramatic gear change. I have to ask you about the football. What do you think about Gareth Southgate standing down today? Is that the right decision?
Look, and this will probably surprise a lot of folk, I think Gareth Southgate's pretty inspirational, to be honest. I think over the course of recent years, the way that he's changed the relationship between the English football team and the English public, the way that he's sought to be a voice of reason on some of the biggest issues of the day, the support that he's provided to particularly England's young players, particularly England's young black players after the appalling abuse that they received when they were beaten by England in penalties a few years ago. I think it's been inspiring. I'm a Scotland fan, everyone knows that. I wasn't sad to see England lose to Spain, but I was probably a little bit sad to see Gareth Southgate lose, because I think he's a good man, and I think he's someone who's stood by what he believes in, and that's probably something that a lot of politicians could learn from.
Inspirational that England didn't win.
Of course, I wasn't sad that England lost. I'm a member of the Tartan Army. I might have enjoyed myself a little bit too much over the weekend, just as England fans enjoyed themselves when Scotland were embarrassingly exited from the tournament before we even got started. To be honest, but I think as a man, Gareth Southgate deserves a significant amount of respect from everyone. And whilst I'm happy to poke fun at the fact that England succumbed on the biggest stage possible, again in pretty extraordinary fashion, the reality is that's not a reflection on Gareth Southgate as an individual. It's not a reflection on the players either. I think some of them are very inspiring as well in the work that they do, and they seem like a good bunch of people, and that's quite an important thing, football aside.
Who would you have dinner with out of any of them, or a drink with? Any of the England players?
Any of the England players? God, that's an interesting one. The goalie, the sub-goalie looks like a good laugh. The sub-goalie, Ramsdale, he looks like he'd be quite good fun. I don't think I could stretch to Pickford, sorry.